Levies are way too weak, regulars are way too strong, and how can we fix that? That's what this video is going to be about. Earlier this week, the developers put out a patch that nerfed levies against regulars. That's because the prevailing community opinion was that levies were way too strong against regulars. The opposite was actually true. Starting in Age 2 and going forwards, even before this patch, regulars were smashing levies. Now, why does the community have this opinion? Why can comments saying things like, exactly, currently levies are infinitely cheap, strong soldiers that are even stronger than regulars? How do things like this get upvoted? How can we see on Reddit, on the forums, and even in some YouTube videos that regulars just aren't worth building? That's because there are so many modifiers. There are so many modifiers to levies versus regulars, so many of them so invisible that people don't understand how one-sided the system is. In addition to that, some people don't seem to understand the frontage system and seem to expect that 4,000 regulars will beat 30,000 levies. That is absurd. There is no historical basis for that whatsoever, and it doesn't make any sense. So we're just going to be talking about all of that in this video. Throughout this video, you will, of course, understand that, yes, regulars completely dominate levies. In fact, in my current game, and why I'm actually making this video, this does need to be changed from multiplayer, of course, because multiplayer right now, raising your levies is basically suicide. But even in single player, even playing very hard on single player, I find it difficult to even enjoy the game. That's because regulars are just so strong that the AI cannot put up any reasonable fight. Now here we have cannons. I'm just using these cannons because I'm memeing. I might get into the cannon, infantry, cavalry balance later, but for now I just made a stack entirely out of cannons. If we do look into the base code right here, we can see that artillery takes 25% damage against infantry. We can see the comment right here, artillery versus infantry in size. That means that at 1/4 the regiment size, in Age 1, 2, 3, I think they go to about 2/5 the regiment size in Age 4, which I am in right here. Cavalry should be doing full damage to cannons and be very capable of destroying them. We can see the late Cavaliers unit right here. In fact, if we look through their unit types, I think almost all of them are up to date. That's an Arquebuster, that's an Age 4 unit. Matchlock Levy, that's a Age 4 Levy. Arquebuster right here. Arquebuster, Noble Cavalry, now that's an Age 1 unit. It's good that they have it. That's actually a big thing. Mailed Knight, that's good that they have it. Once again, it's good they have it. Pistolier. The AI right now, I'm just trying to say this right now, I am playing on very hard. The AI gets a tech boost, and in addition to having a tech boost, gets 20% discipline. Yes, 20% discipline. So what exactly happens when I just make a meme comp of regulars? Now, before I go any further, do note that this video will mostly be a podcast. I will be using some visual things in front of you, but for a lot of this, we're going to be looking at game files. We're going to be looking at stats. We're not really going to be doing anything that's interesting. I'm, in fact, making this in a lot of ways that I hope the developers look at this, and I hope to change some people's opinions, because I think that the developers are listening to people with horribly misinformed and entirely incorrect opinions. I am calling you out. And because of that, they are making really bad decisions based on these misinformed opinions. And these decisions are making the game worse for people that want to enjoy multiplayer and for people that even want to enjoy single player, because it has reached the point where I can't reasonably take the game seriously by the end of Age 2 because I can slaughter basically infinite AI with my regulars. Okay, so as always, do make sure to like, do make sure to subscribe, do make sure to leave a comment down below. I do, as I have in a lot of these videos, I made a giant post on Patreon with all this information if you want to go look at this yourself. Any information not here, I'm just looking at the game files, which I'm assuming you own the game. If you don't, that's cool too. Just continue to watch the video. So you can click on this. It's a free post. You can just read that. But yeah, just like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Let's go look. Okay, so here's my meme comp of cannons. And these cannons should be getting destroyed by their cavalry. We are outnumbered 34,000 to 10,000, which, if this is historical, this would be a completely one-sided slaughter. There are very few examples of being outnumbered this hard actually leading you anywhere. In fact, I do, for those of you, this is particularly for Johan and other people who like to talk about regulars versus levies, if we do look into our Swedish invasion of Russia, the casualties afterwards, despite being outnumbered, they were outnumbered 2-1 by the Russians and their allies, and they did have a large amount of regulars, and despite that, they only did about 50% more casualties. The casualty rate of regulars versus levies, historically speaking, was about 2-1. The winnable battles for regulars versus levies, historically, was about 2-1. Here I am outnumbered 3.5-1. So who wins? Now, before we even go in here, I do need to talk about our first thing here. Our first thing here is, regulars do bonus strength damage to levies, starting at 100% and reducing per age. You do need to go to higher tier units to reduce the damage taken. Levies do reduce damage to regulars, starting at 20% damage, increasing 5% per age. And you do need to research those higher tier units to unlock that bonus. Levy combat efficiency increases the damage they do to regulars. Age 3 levies have negative 10% combat efficiency, then negative... Oh, no, that's wrong. Sorry, I'm just going to edit that real quick. It's negative 10% in age 4. So it goes negative 10% in age 3, negative 10% in age 4. Then, oh, I know why I was doing that, because I was listing it in total. Okay, never mind. Past me was correct. It's negative 10% total in age 3, then negative 20% total in age 4, then negative 40% total in age 5, then negative 60% total in age 6. Levies have negative 10% discipline and lose combat experience almost instantly. Levies do not reinforce, and levies do only 30% damage to garrisons. And, importantly here, men-at-arms levies are not men-at-arms regulars. Now, you guys all want to see this, but let's see this in action here so you guys can understand I'm not lying here. Here we can see, I think it's this guy. I have looked at this before. This guy is a levy, and the mailed knight is an age 1 levy, so we do plus 200% damage. That is insane. Holy crap. You do 200% bonus strength damage to age 1 levies. Okay, now how far does that go here? Let's actually look. I think we can find... I've looked at this because I was preparing to do this video. So here we can see here, by age 4, this bonus has gone down to 25%. So there is some weird math here. I'm not entirely sure what the number is here. I'm not sure whether... Oh, right, their tactics reduces damage, right? That's what tactics does. But we can see that these levies are taking monstrous damage. Now, I did mention further in my post, but let's mention it now, that the AI isn't being stupid. They're not using these noble levies because they're stupid. In fact, they have bonus research. They're quite smart. The problem is, if you want to upgrade your nobility, you need to be a monarchy. Not everybody is a monarchy. So your noble levies, if you're not a monarchy, are currently stuck in age 1. Now, let's finally play through this. Let's finally play through this so you guys can see. Now, despite being hard countered and memeing myself with cannons, we can see pretty outrageous KDA ratios here. The enemies have way more troops, but despite having way more troops, they're getting shredded on the front line. And then because they're getting shredded on the front line, they're constantly outnumbered, and the casualties are outrageous. Despite a horrible outnumbered situation, my artillery meme has just completely blown through the AI. In fact, if we look at the casualties at the end of the battle, that's 8,000 to 1,000. 8-to-1 casualties using only artillery and getting hit by so much cavalry that should be shredding through me. Okay, let's then talk about why this is all happening and why this is way too complicated and why a guy actually did make a meme on this, and I haven't seen this meme. It's a funny one. Basically, there is balance. Levies get specific modifiers: reduced discipline, reduced combat, reduced garrison damage. Then they upgrade their damage to regulars per age. Then they get nerfed in later ages. Then you get a bunch of privilege modifiers that can counter the age reduction. Then there was an attempt to reduce their damage in the patch, which reduced it way too much. Then that had to be way smaller. But then their levy size gets smaller to compensate for this. Then that's blah, 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 blah. Okay. these are all modifiers that you guys don't understand, because I do understand them, and I do know that I can just spam cannons. For the record, the reason I am spamming cannons is because of the manpower system. Currently, cannons use less manpower than infantry, and because they use just manpower, that means I can just get more of them. It might cost more money, but I can just get more of them, and you can see I'm not exactly hurting for money. That's why I'm doing the cannon meme, by the way. If I was actually using like a real combat thing, this would be better. I do eventually go to, I think, 4 or 5 stacks of cannons in this save, but this is, you know, I was basically testing here if this cannon meme would work, and it did work. And remember, this AI is on very hard. They have 20% discipline, and they cannot fight me reasonably. Okay, so what are the unforeseen flaws in this system, beyond that your regular player just doesn't understand how broken regulars are right now? Obviously, levies deal more damage to regulars per age, then they also deal less damage to regulars per age. Only monarchies have access to levy laws that can increase combat efficiency by 25%. Now, to show you what that means, levy combat efficiency here, we can see this right here. This increases, can we actually show this tooltip right here? Yes, this increases how much damage levies will do to regulars. Now, the problem is only monarchies have, apparently, laws. There we go. Only monarchies have access to the levy laws. In the levy laws, we can see noble levies. Noble levies gives you 25% combat efficiency. I'll also say this later, but let me emphasize this now. Peasant levies nerfs you really, really hard, and you should get off it to go noble levies as soon as possible. Because theocracies and because republics don't have noble levies, they are going to be significantly far behind. Only monarchies have access to auxilium et concilium that can improve levy combat efficiency by 25%. Now, this one is another thing that only monarchies can do, auxilium et concilium. You can put this onto your estate, and then you will have 25% levy combat efficiency. As you can imagine right now, increasing your levy damage by 50% under monarchies gives them a very large advantage. It's a bit of an insurmountable advantage, realistically speaking here. Okay. Only monarchies can access higher level noble levies. I did talk about that. In combination with tribal cavalry can never upgrade. This means tribes are stuck in age 1, getting absolutely shredded by regulars, which tribes did remain relevant and did remain powerful even into the later ages. There are some examples of Moroccan tribal levies, tribal armies being able to defeat Castilian ones, and there is no example of tribes being massacred in 700 to 1 casualties outside of, like you guys are gonna mention Rorke's Drift? Like, shut up. So, only monarchies can upgrade their noble cavalry past age 1, and only nobody can upgrade their tribal cavalry. Now, let me be clear right now. A lot of you guys don't seem to understand what levies are. Some of you guys seem to think that levies are peasants with a pitchfork. They're not. Levies, to give you an example of the English longbow, Englishmen had to, by law, practice, I believe, once a week, was it on Sundays, in order to be good at being a longbowman. That was by law. Longbows were a levy. Knights were a levy. See, monarchies, everyone, in fact, didn't really like throwing away their food-producing peasants to die. It was stupid, it didn't work, and shockingly, people could put 2 and 2 together. If you take all your people off making food and they go die, then you starve to death and your entire country collapses. This was a pretty common knowledge. Levies were generally, I would best describe them as a National Guard type situation. Although they weren't as good as regulars because they weren't professional soldiers, they were still capable of fighting. Often they were capable of doing 2 to 1. It was about that. Every levy, I should say every 2 levies was about equal to a regular in battles. I would say throughout history, I'm just spitballing that number, that seems to be about accurate, right? So knights are also levies. In fact, we can see that right here. You have the famed plated knights, the big badass plated knights. Those are levies. Now, the issue here is in-game, these plated knights will get completely shred away by you deciding to give a dude some armor, not even full plate armor, just some armor, and telling him to go ride around. the full-plated dudes were not until age 3 when we get the Lancers. Now, you can argue that the Lancers were more full-plated armored dudes. Sure, and I might agree with that. Maybe they can start going a bit more even with the nobles, and that's why the nobles stopped being as prevalent once the plated knights stopped being so dominant on the battle. I mean, you can list lots of things here, but what I'm trying to say, levies were not as bad as anyone thinks they were. And it's kind of a problem when levies are a significant part of the system, and A, only monarchies can really even use them, and B, even monarchies can only really use them as a last-ditch effort. If you tried to use your levies as a frontline unit, as a regular unit, they will just get obliterated. In other words, non-monarchies have no reason to raise levies starting in age 3. They will potentially even deal less damage to regulars in age 6 than they did in age 1. I'll show that down there. The system is way too complicated. That's just obvious. The system is just way too complicated. Now, let me be clear here. I do think Europa Universalis 5, I do believe, is a fantastic game, and I'm raising these issues because I think it's a fantastic game. If I didn't like a game, I wouldn't be making a video talking about it. There would be no point. I would just stop playing it. The reason I'm making this video is because I do like the game. I think it's a very, very good game. I just think it's being steered in the wrong direction by people who didn't take the time to properly understand the systems. Okay. Regular damage bonus to levies is only strength damage, not morale damage, causing weirdly ahistorical effect of levies having freakishly high morale effectively and fighting nearly to the death. Now, I have seen some screenshots, some examples of like 30,000 levies beating 7,000 regulars, and people go, look, regulars are useless. And then you look at the KDA and it's like 15 to 1. Now, look, I don't know who you are, but if you win a battle, killing one guy for every 15 guys you lose, that's not good. That's stupid. That is a country-ruining situation. But that is caused because the regulars will often completely destroy their strength, killing everyone to a man, but not actually make them leave the battle, and then the regulars will eventually be moraled out of the battle. That's a terrible situation, and anyone who thinks, by the way, that just because you lost a battle dealing 15 to 1 casualties, anyone who thinks that that makes regulars bad is stupid. Not only can you just use regulars with levies and then have your regulars destroy the levies and then have the levies in the back to help win the battles, but like, regulars are the only way to increase your army. I don't know how you guys haven't understood this yet. It's kind of weird to me. You can't like create a levy generating system. If you gave me the opportunity to create a levy or a regular, I would take the regular any day of the week, and I can't even create a levy. So it's stupid to compare the two because all you can do to increase your army strength is increase your regulars. Now, to be clear here, the AI is pretty bad, unfortunately, at using standing armies. Now, I can show you that pretty easily here. If I go to, I'm playing on very hard in this save, and on very hard, the AI gets unlimited billion bucks. Despite having that much money, despite making 500 gold a month and having 117,000 gold in the bank, despite having 115,000 manpower, Poland has decided to sit here with a mere nearly 30,000 men. In fact, I can actually go look here, and I can see that they can even produce a lot more barracks to even produce more manpower. Despite that, they just don't. In other words, if the AI was improved, and I very much assume they will be improved at some point, to actually produce more regulars, then players will very quickly have to fight full regular AI armies and realize just how pathetic levies are, just how undertuned levies are. Now, to be clear, this war, this coalition, I only fired, I just attacked in and just fought everyone because I was just like, could I beat this entire coalition with only cannons? Yes, I could, resoundingly, complete annihilation. It was like 10 to 1. Even when I ran into terrible battles over and over again, I'm doing 8 to 1 casualties in terrible battles. Okay. Now, this one is important. It is effectively impossible to tell at a glance how strong armies are. A levy stack hiding a couple armored horsemen will annihilate another levy stack. By that, what I mean is if you're in age 1 and you have the sergeantry. By the way, sergeantry is so much stronger than the Republic manpower building. For some reason, in age 1, Monarchies get to have a 5 manpower building. Republics get to have a 2 manpower building. Not sure what's going on with that one. But if you do use your manpower and you build like 3-4 armored horsemen, they can hide within a levy stack. So you might look like you have 10,000 levies against 10,000 levies, but if you have 4 armored horsemen like sneaking in the back like hee hee hee, you will just destroy the opposing levy stack, and it's really hard to tell at a glance. It's really hard to tell at a glance just how strong the opponents are, and it's really hard to tell at a glance just how weak you are. In fact, if you would look at this battle, it at a glance would appear that I only have 10,000 people, but you would have to like zoom in and look at the individual models, and then while zooming in and look at these models, you would have to think to yourself, oh, that's all cannons, so that's actually worth 170% more, which is like, okay. I mean, you could look over here and you say, oh, it's 11,000 pure cannons. Kitty. Yeah, I know. You're being... Stop it. Kitty, just lay down. Okay. Where was I in this one? So let's then talk about how complicated it gets to deal more damage per age, but then also deal less damage per age. In age 1, you will deal 20% more damage, or sorry, you will deal 20% only damage, so only deal 20% damage to regulars in age 1 with levies, without levy combat modifiers. So that means, Kitty, that you'll deal 20% damage. In age 2, you will then deal 25% damage. In age 3, you will deal 30% damage minus 10% for 27% damage. In age 4, you will deal 35% damage minus 20% damage for 28% damage. In age 5, you will deal 40% damage minus 40% damage for 24% damage. In age 6, you will deal 45% damage minus 60% damage for 18% damage. Not only do these bonuses work against each other, but this is just stupid. You deal more damage to deal less damage. Like, I'm sorry, this is just too complicated. And the fact that you would have to know that there's 2 competing systems with each other is silly. This is of course mitigated by levy combat modifiers, but without access to the levy laws and auxilium et concilium, then the max you can do as a republic is to maintain a decently strong nobility with the common militias privilege for about 50% total levy combat efficiency. Now to show you what I mean right here, anybody can get common militias. You're basically just killing yourself if you do not get common militias. It is just that good. You must have common militias. If you don't, you're just destroying yourself. Then the strength of your nobility will give you levy combat efficiency. With about 40%, I believe, strength and nobility, you'll get 25% levy combat efficiency. But I think most people do not want in the late game to have outrageously powerful nobility. You would still have to do that though if you want to use levies, which is silly. Like, I mean, sure, maybe nobility could make your levies stronger, but like, you literally just are suiciding if you don't have a strong nobility and raise levies. I'm not entirely sure on that one. Okay. So, if you are a republic and you have 40% strong nobles, which will be hard to do, but let's say hypothetically we could do this, you'll deal 40% damage in age 1. You'll do 40% damage in age 6. So you'll go from dealing 30% damage in age 1 to 40% damage in age 6. And if you don't have a strong nobility, you'll go from 40% damage in age 1. Sorry, 30%. This is why it's even complicating me. You'll go from dealing 30% damage in age 1 to about 30% damage in age 6. In other words, the system almost makes itself entirely irrelevant. And again, the fact that I must maintain a strong nobility on every single nation, I must give them every privilege to keep them strong, or else it's not worth raising levies, I'm not sure that's historically accurate. Monarchies can reliably get 100% levy combat efficiency, which makes them go from 40% damage in age 1 to 63% damage in age 6, again with a strong nobility. It's more noticeable here, but still makes me question why this system is even so complicated to begin with. And again, it doesn't make sense. Republics will stay about the same levy combat efficiency stay at the same levy damage to regulars at every single age, and monarchies, if they give everything up and keep a strong nobility, then they can see some slight progression. But it doesn't, why is this so complicated? It's 2 modifiers. For the record, you must be using the noble levies law to have levies even worth raising. Any AI still on peasant levies or any player unaware of this will rapidly have their levies shred to paper and basically delete their own population. That's because peasant levies gives negative 10% levy combat efficiency in return for irrelevant bonuses, and noble levies gives 25% levy combat efficiency in return for more noble levies. So what are my suggestions then? Remove the levy reduction, or say the reduction to levy combat efficiency per age. The only way you could actually see this is to go into ages, highlight them, go into age 1, not see levy combat, go into age 2, not see levy combat, go into age 3, you still won't see levy combat unless you scroll down. Age 4, once again, you won't, you can see this one, you have to scroll down, you see 20%. Then age 5, you have to scroll down to see this one. You'll see it goes from, instead of going down 10%, now it goes down 20% at this age for negative 40%. And age 6, you have to scroll down again to see negative 60%. And that's if you even know that you can highlight these to see the bonuses. It's too complicated. It's just too complicated. Add levy laws to all government forms. I just think all government forms should get levy laws. Republics are just too weak right now, particularly with the nerf to merchant republic. I just don't think republics are worth staying as. Remove the negative 10% levy combat efficiency from peasant levies and reduce noble levies to 10%. Also, increase peasant levies to net plus 10% peasant levy size, seeing as how useless 2.5% is. Now, to explain this one, it's actually really easy to explain. So, number one, peasant levies basically does nothing, because 2.5% is nothing, which I'll show in a second, and then it debuffs you. Noble levies gives you 20% more nobles, but there's not that many nobles, so sure, fine, but then it gives you 25% levy combat efficiency. In my opinion, reduce that to 10%. I'll get into a second how balanced that is, but let's talk about how useless this peasant levy size is. Already, we have a 20% peasant levy size. Then over here in Auxilium et Concilium, we have 10%. So it's 30% more levies. 2.5% in areas with 100% control is like 1.7% peasant levy size. It's nothing. It's meaningless. It's irrelevant. And nerfing your levies against regulars to get that bonus, it literally is a debuff. Okay. Reduce Auxilium et Concilium 10% levy combat efficiency in return for giving 2% happiness to nobility. Then give republics theocracies a unique law for themselves. So either give them Auxilium et Concilium, but like for burghers, for republics, or maybe the theocracy can get one for clerics. But everybody should be able to get some levy combat efficiency and some levy size, so nobility don't just have some insane advantage. You can argue, well, that makes it auto pick. Sure, I mean, reasonably, it kind of does make it auto pick, but at the same time, it's like an imbalance between the different government types. And if it was nerfed to 10%, it wouldn't be as required. And I just think the other government types should be able to compete a bit more. But in return, it should only just be 10%. This makes levies a bit weaker in age 1 to 3, but equalize at age 4 and be stronger in age 5+. Then entirely remove the bonus damage done from levies, or say 2 levies from regulars. Basically, I just don't think you should be able, like, can you even see it? I mean, if I go to, I don't think it's even in the game. Can we see Landsknecht deal bonus damage to levies? No. If I look at my levies, if I see to age 4, can I see that this is reducing? Where are you? Demi cannon, pistoliers, arquebusiers, flintlock levy. Can I see that my flintlock levy? I can see combat efficiency against regulars, but I can't see anything else. No, I can't even see that I'm taking bonus damage from regulars. It's just not available information in game. So later age levies are completely blown out and just way too weak, but early game levies go about even with age 1 at the very least. They go about even with the regulars. So weaken them a little bit in age 1 to 3. Equalize at age 4, then they get stronger, so they're still worth using, but then entirely remove the bonus damage done from regulars. Now, you could argue this should be different, but I just think this is an invisible modifier that doesn't make any sense. Why are levies taking so much strength damage and not morale damage? this could hypothetically, if you want to keep it in the game, it should A, be listed, and then B, it should be changed to morale damage, not strength damage. And with this situation, we would see levies would do less damage to regulars in the early ages, but in return, we could have, you know, levies not being completely annihilated on strength, and instead, early age levies could take a bit more morale damage. Now, that's if you even keep it. I don't think we should keep it because there's just too many modifiers. In this system here, we could remove 2 different modifiers, so there'd be at least 2 less things here that we could learn. We could remove at least 2 of them. Now, as for men-at-arms levies aren't men-at-arms regulars, this was a change done that's a bit complicated, and you can only know by highlighting and looking specifically into them. Basically, men-at-arms levies were a bit too strong, and eventually did get nerfed. I need to go find them. They should be here. Yes. So if we have men-at-arms and men-at-arms, these aren't these. What does that mean? Men-at-arms as levies. Oh boy, I need to go this again. Men-at-arms as levies do not have the negative 10% strength damage taken and do not have the additional combat speed. By the way, do you see here that I'm doing total efficiency of battle 42%. So this would be pretty good, at least. Maybe a bit too good because I stacked all the modifiers. Over here, the men-at-arms, that is actually the regular, has negative 10% strength damage taken and 3 combat speed. So personally, I think this is a bit confusing. You could argue that by buffing these levies to be equal, that it would make burger levies a bit too strong. I think these are burger levies, or did they get changed to only soldiers? If this does make burger levies a bit too strong, then I think that they should just be restricted to soldiers, only get men-at-arms. You might say historically burger levies were actually really strong. Maybe we should just keep it that way for historical accuracy. They would still be levies, therefore they would still do reduced damage. They would come in larger sizes, but they would do reduced damage. You can argue it either way. I just think for the sake of simplicity, they should probably be the same. It's just a consistency issue with me. Okay, so this removes 2 different modifiers from the equation, potentially a 3rd modifier, if we equalize the men-at-arms, simplifying the system immensely. Alternatively, you could just rename them, by the way. You could have, like, men-at-arms as the regulars, and then, like, burger levies, or, like, armored levies, perhaps. We could just call them armored levies. It's one of these things that's, like, I have to explain it to people that, like, oh yeah, men-at-arms aren't men-at-arms. So, like, you gotta look at men-at-arms and men-at-arms, because they're different. It's just, you know. Simplifying the system immensely, and that's what we want to do. We want to simplify it. It also makes it significantly more simple and readable watching your levies upgrade per age normally. It also removes the catastrophic damage boost regulars get that causes levies to take such insane casualties. A small note here is that levies winning battles despite ridiculous losses is actually caused by the moraling out regulars, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, I went over that. It's just, if you win and you take 15-to-1 casualties, it's not good. You're not winning, you're losing. And I just think they should remove the strength damage modifier. And instead, levies at each age should just upgrade. It should just be an upgrade. I upgrade my levies because I want them to do more damage to regulars. Good, simple. You know, I don't want to upgrade my levies because I did less damage because the age ticked over and now I need to upgrade from my levy to my other levy. And there's also an invisible damage bonus in the background. I mean, it's kind of simple. Like I will say, it's kind of simple, like age 1. If we look at the feudal levy, who is, oh boy, levies. Feudal levies, there we go. If we do look at feudal levies, okay, oh my god. If we do look at feudal levies, these ones upgrading makes sense and it's like super readable because we just see strength damage done, negative 10%. We also see combat efficiency versus regulars, 0.20. Okay, that seems pretty good. Pretty normal. We can read that one very well. Then we got peasant levy over here. Now peasant levies, they upgrade and they do more damage to regulars. We can see that, right? Nice and simple. And they lose that 10% strength damage done reduction. So these upgrade look really simpler. I can look at age 1 and age 2 and be like, ah, that makes sense. Into age 3, we can also see that it would make sense because if we have, they changed all the text and I'm like going blind. If we look at Matchhawk levies in age 3, we can see, oh, they're exactly like the other levies, but they do more damage to regulars. Okay, this makes sense. If I want to continue to use levies against regulars, let me upgrade them. that should be it. I should just be able to look at the unit and say, that makes sense. Okay. I would also remove the penalty to combat experience that levies get, as drilling levies should be pretty normal behavior. There are tons of historical examples of levies being drilled for battle. Now, you could argue this would be bad and would close the gap a bit too much, but if I don't want my levies being completely annihilated in battle, I should just be able to drill them, right? And if at the end of all this, that we equalize it too much and levies are just destroying regulars, then there are some changes we can do, and there are some really obvious things I'm going to point out here in a second, but just give me 1 second, because cavalry and cannons are blatantly better than infantry, and the fact that levies predominantly raise as infantry, like 99% of them are infantry, is a weakness, which does call into question, then why would I make regular infantry instead of just regular cavalry and cannons? And that is one problem. People do make regular infantry and they find them a bit disappointing, and they are a bit disappointing. And I'm not going to get into the whole levy balance here, but this is important for the situation. The obvious flaw here is that people simply do not want to use levies. They also dislike how levies infinitely respawn. Levies are a bit tedious to use. Respawning them can be annoying, and they do not rally. Therefore, I suggest a few changes. Now, what I mean by this is I feel like a lot of people are disingenuous when they talk about how good levies are. I feel like some people lie, literally, are just lying because they want levies to be weak because they don't want to use levies, which is fine. But, like, let's be honest here. If you just don't want to use levies, just say you don't want to use levies because they're annoying. How can we make them less annoying them, and how can we make them how can we make them a bigger part of our army without being annoyed to use them? Levies should raise by area, not by province. This will produce far fewer stacks that you have to manage and reduce annoying considerably. I should say reduce the annoyance. I'd argue they should raise from an entire region, as that would reduce annoyance considerably. You know, I did it right here. Why didn't I do it right here? Okay. Now, by that, what I mean is levies currently raise per province, which, as you can imagine, if I raised my levies and I had 20 different stacks, that would just be simply annoying. It would not be fun. It would be annoying. So my suggestion is to instead raise them by area, which combines a couple provinces into one area. So instead of raising 20 stacks, I would raise, what is that, about 5 stacks? That's a bit more reasonable. Into some areas of the world, you can also see, like, I mean, if I'm playing Historical Bohemia, I raise 3 stacks, right? If I'm playing Austria, why is Austria in 3 different regions? Well, I guess Austria itself is in 2. That's weird. All of Bavaria is in 1, but Austria is in 2. But you get the idea. Areas would make it very simple. Now, if you want to go full simplicity, let's just raise by region. Now, if we do raise by region, this would stop France from being able to easily use British levies, or Britain to be able to easily use French levies, because they would have to be on 2 different landmasses, right? It would just simplify things like the Balkans. It would allow, for example, Iberia would still not be able to easily raise Maghrebi levies, vice versa. So I think raising by region would still be fine and totally good. And I think this would simplify the system so much to just have like 1 stack. I have 1 stack. You could say Hungary would have 2, but 2 is a lot better than 78, right? So I just think that would make it a lot more simple. Levies should have a rally point after spawning, where they will run together and merge, which seems pretty simple. Levies should auto-balance themselves as they merge from the rally. So one thing a lot of people are annoyed by is when you do merge your levies, they don't auto-balance. That's annoying, and that can lead to really dumb situations. If I auto-balance right here, will it... No, okay, so this one does pretty good. Well, I mean, it's because I only have cannons. It doesn't know what to do. Then let's change balance unit, because balance unit is super tedious and doesn't actually help a lot of times. Okay, balance unit should be changed to the following equation. All cavalry will prefer the flanks. Obvious, cavalry do best on flanks. That's just the best place to put them. Auto balance should just put cavalry on flanks by default. All infantry will prefer the middle. Infantry just do best in the middle. That's literally where they best perform. They take 67% reduced damage if they're in the middle compared to being on a flank. So they just do best in the middle. Okay, higher initiative units will always get priority to deploy first, which again is really obvious. After this, cannons will either be used to fill the formation to 10 combat with or go to reserves. Supply units will never be used out of reserve. Now, obviously, if you have an army and you have some funky formation you're trying to do, if you're trying to stack cavalry on one flank or anything like that, you can do it yourself. But at a glance, very easily, balance unit should just be a button that I can just look at it and I can just click, okay, I'm just balanced. Boom. I just balance. Boom. It should just be that easy. So when I raise my levies, I don't A, have to click the button, and B, even once I do click the button, if I'm trying to play optimally, I shouldn't have to pause the game and let me use my prisoners of war right here as an example. Oh, it doesn't let me put them in the formation. Oh, that's a neat change. I shouldn't have to go in and manually be, okay, noble cavalry, you guys get on the left. Okay, infantry, you guys get in the middle. I shouldn't have to do that. It's like an obvious thing. It should, okay. Levy respawn bug needs to be fixed. Me saying this won't help it get fixed faster, but it still does. While disbanding and raising levies might be historical, it's tedious. It's tedious and really unfun to do. Instead, levies should be able to spend a month or two performing a replenish action, which will drop morale to 0 and eventually replenish all their stacks, and add new stacks if capable. Alternatively, just let levies reinforce. Because fundamentally, this might be historical, this might be like impactful, but this is really tedious gameplay, and I think a lot of people do not like this gameplay. You might not need this gameplay if you do this one up here, but I just don't think the disbanding and re-raising is that fun. Obviously, levies should have their own background levy pool that's slowly replenishing. That's actually how it does work in game, and you won't be able to just fully replenish your levies to full because you'll need to wait for the pool to replenish. For those of you guys who don't know, there is actually a levy pool. It just gets bugged if you stack wipe enemies. If you actually continue to deal damage and never stack wipe them, you will actually reduce the amount of levies they get. If you stack wipe them, they replenish to full. And it's an issue, yeah. So the two remaining issues now are mercenaries and infantry. Infantry are too weak, which I might get into in a different video, but at least for the video I do, at least for this video, I do believe regular infantry should inherit 10% strength taken modifier. So a lot of people continue to use infantry and they think infantry is good, but actually infantry is quite bad. Then why do people get confused into thinking infantry is good? That's because you are using the men-at-arms unit. The men-at-arms, as I have said, has combat speed 3 instead of 2 and 10% strength damage reduction. That, at a glance, would appear that Age 2 infantry are good, but they're actually not. In Age 3 forward, it's best to just stack cavalry and cannons, and that's what performs best. And the men-at-arms unit, and potentially the Landsknecht unit, and potentially Maurician infantry, and any of your special infantry can confuse you into thinking that actually infantry are good. They're not. And I might make a video going into my whole reasons on that, but we're already pretty deep into this video at 42 minutes, so we don't need to go into that. So my opinion is all infantry should inherit that. Not levied infantry, regular infantry. That's because regular infantry do not perform as well as cavalry and cannons do into enemies. Cavalry regulars are like, they're just, oh my god, they're so good. But infantry regulars are just a bit underpowered, and it's kind of hidden because a men-at-arms unit that you raise by default in Age 2 is pretty good. So that would mean, for example, the handgunner would take negative 10% strength damage as well. Now, a little known fact, the handgunner is terrible, and he's not very good. A lot of people seem to think that the handgunner is this good unit, and this is part of the problem that I actually think is happening, is that a lot of people do build the handgunner thinking that, oh my god, he's got a gun, he's so cool, because guns are cool, and you do want to build the handgunner, and I did it myself. And what I realized really quickly is the men-at-arms regular was so much better than the handgunner that if you use the men-at-arms regular, you did really good with Age 2 and could shred through. If you had 10 stacks of men-at-arms in the middle flank, they would never lose. But if you get handgunners, they're not very good. Morale damage is not nearly as good as you think it is because, again, regulars are mostly doing their damage through strength damage, so having morale damage is not really that important to begin with, and then they take a penalty to their combat speed, literally having half the combat speed of a men-at-arms. Then they take a penalty to their food consumption. So the handgunner is terrible, and the men-at-arms is quite good. As you go into Age 3, a lot of people will probably spam the pikemen, and by Age 3, yes, your infantry will generally absolutely obliterate everybody else, but a lot of that comes down to, where is the pikeman? Oh, halberdier. In Age 3, it's halberdier, not pikeman. It comes down to the halberdier has nothing. this guy should get negative 10% strength damage. A lot of people do have age 3 special infantry. In age 2, Bohemia has theirs. In age 3, all the Germans have the Landsknecht. There's also the Black Army, the Maurician. There's a lot of them. And it can confuse you into thinking infantry are good, because the Landsknecht over here, we can see has an amazing strength damage taken and strength damage done modifiers, which are insane. That's really good. But this is more so how actual infantry regulars should be. They should actually be good. Actually, isn't the Maurician age 4? I've been saying that wrong. Yeah, Maurician's age 4. But the problem is, as we start going into age 4 and we start seeing the Maurician, not only are there problems where even in my stacks right here, here's the Maurician, not only does he not have that strength damage taken, but the issue here is it takes us 16 manpower to upkeep a Maurician. The reason I spammed cannons is it takes 6. I can almost have 3 cannons for every unit of Maurician. Now, you guys might not understand here, but again, the balance problem here is that artillery take only 25% damage from infantry. That's in the code. You can see that right here. Cavalry take half damage from infantry. That means cavalry and infantry deal the same damage to each other on the flank, but cavalry deal double damage. But cavalry also have significantly less manpower, as we can see right here. So instead of 1 cavalry against an infantry, it would actually be 2.8 cavalry against an infantry. So even if on the flank infantry could beat 1 cavalry stack, it wouldn't be 1 cavalry. I would have 2.8. You would have 10 infantry on a flank, and I would have 28 cavalry. Now, your infantry gonna beat 28 cavalry? My gut says no. And in addition to that, cavalry have higher initiative, and they have significantly higher combat speed advantages. Even into age 3, where their maximum strength starts depreciating a bit, and they only deal the same damage as a Maurician, because the Maurician will deal 1.8 damage per 800 for 1200 damage, I believe. And the Heavy Lancer will deal 4 damage per 300 for 12 damage. So they do literally the same damage. They do the same damage to each other. But the cavalry will have 2.8 stacks of cavalry sprinting in, which means that yes, due to the higher combat speed and due to the flanking bonus and due to the higher initiative, the cavalry will keep hitting the front line faster and faster. This means that unfortunately, infantry regulars are not worth building unless you have these unique ones. And not everybody has these unique ones. And while these unique ones are quite cool and quite interesting, the Landsknecht here, it is like, it's barely equalizing the difference between cavalry and infantry to have a Landsknecht, which is, yeah. So I just think that infantry should just get that 10% strength damage modifier baseline, because you can have less of them. They just take more manpower and they're not performing. And a lot of people, they do like their infantry stacks. They're used to EU4. They build lots of infantry. The regulars don't do as good as mine are doing. And then you go, dang, this sucks. Okay. That modifier will help out mercenaries. And just to be clear, there is another thing. And I did run a bunch of the math in the background. And it depends on a lot of different situations. I don't think we're going to get age 1 footmen to actually be good. But why are footmen? I just get lost every time. I don't think we're going to get age 1 footmen to be good, but if we did that change, we could actually get the footmen to have 10% strength damage reduction instead of 5. So even though he would lose that double strength damage modifier, the levies would do a little bit less damage into him, and he'd get a little bit of strength damage reduction. I don't think the footman is going to be good. Fundamentally, I think you just stack cavalry. I think cavalry are just much better in age 1. Now, a lot of people seem to think that age 1 regulars are bad because of combat width. In order to fill combat width, you would need 30,000 levies in age 1. 30,000 levies are pretty hard to get in age 1 for most countries. So if you just stack armored horsemen, not only can you get a lot of them, but they'll just fill out the combat width and deal a lot of damage, because cavalry just do a lot of damage in the early ages. They do a lot of damage in every age, but it does equalize in age 4. Now, another misconception is that levies are actually frontline inefficient, or sorry, regulars are frontline inefficient. Actually, that's not true. Regulars might be frontline inefficient with my changes in age 1, but there's not much I can do to the system. Like, I could recommend an entire system rework, yes, but for now, regulars will add to your army 99% of the time, they're going to add to your front line as well. At the very least, even if their front line inefficient, we still get more units on the front line. Like, even if we have like 60,000 levies we're playing like in India, even then I would have more units, so eventually I would win the battle. So I don't think that system really needs to be adjusted. Getting a couple armored horsemen in Age 1 is massively impactful, is all I can say from my experience. But let's talk about mercenaries. Now, mercenaries would be buffed by infantry taking negative 10% strength damage, but personally, I think mercenaries are deplorable. And I think that's where a lot of this system breaks down, is mercenaries are really, really, really bad. They're basically never worth using. So let's talk about them. Number 1, mercenaries should just be EU4 mercenaries. Anyone who knows me knows I hate old thing equals better arguments. But I think in this case, they just worked better. They should have a manpower pool, bonus to power, and large maintenance that makes them costly. Basically, your money never actually goes down in the current system. You never run into debt. Even me in this situation, I could get just some pure upkeep. I could get a 3rd stack of pure regular cannons. And that's if I'm reinforcing. When I'm not reinforcing, I think I could afford 5 stacks of cannons. Your money just never goes down, even buying the most expensive units. I think mercenaries need to actually lower your money. They're just not worth using. In the short term, mercenaries should be 50% cheaper to hire and have an inherent 20% discipline modifier. With that 20% discipline, mercenaries in Age 1 would outperform levies. That's where I think they're supposed to be using. Now, you're obviously going to run into a problem with the frontage, where levies, I mean, like, you're just not going to be able to do it. Like, 20,000 people should not lose to 2,000 people. Like, that's just not, I don't think that's good gameplay, and I don't think that's very readable on the map, and that's just bad. Now, if you do slot in mercenaries into the back of your army, if you do actually manage to afford them, if you're playing Venice or something, then yes, they should perform really, really, really well, but right now they don't. 20% discipline would basically solve these issues, and before you would worry about late game stacking the hell out of mercenaries, do remember that as ages go by, if you do actually look down here, you will see that we actually do have... Do we not? Oh, no, they removed it. Oh, no, here we go. Amount of mercenaries goes down by 90% in Age 6. The amount of mercenaries goes down by 40% in Age 5. So this would just make it so mercenaries could actually be usable in Age 1, 2, 3, 4, when, like, historically a lot of people used mercenaries. And I think that would just be better. Like, getting a couple thousand mercenaries should massively boost your battle, whereas right now it's not worth the gold at all. Period. Like, they're just too expensive. And then even if you did afford it, they just don't perform well enough to begin with. So just give them that 20% discipline modifier. Lastly, and this is just a thought, merc maintenance modifiers are odd because mercenaries don't reinforce, which means mercenaries die in a battle or two, then cost no maintenance because they're all dead. This also impacts merc performance, because after the first battle, they will literally not reinforce because they're mercenaries. But that leads to a problem where now they have less strength in the regiment and perform weaker. So mercenaries only get one good battle to perform in, and then they do bad. And the 20% discipline would help that a lot, but I really just think mercenaries need to have their own manpower pool, and they should recover, and mercenaries should be a lot of maintenance, and you should struggle to afford them. So that's this entire video. That's just my opinions on the whole system. That's my opinions on everything. Once again, I do think EU5 is an amazing game. I just think the levy I think regulars and levies just have too many modifiers. These are just too many modifiers. Like, you need to know what's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 modifiers. You need to know 8 modifiers to understand the balance between them. That's just too much. I mean, and that causes so many bad opinions. And I think particularly the infantry problem causes a lot of bad opinions. So that's it. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody. And as always, I hope you all have a great rest of your day.